It was a quiet Tuesday morning when John noticed something unusual at his front door. The sun was just rising, casting a soft orange glow over the neighborhood, but the usual calm of the street felt different. He stepped outside and saw a plain white envelope tucked under the doormat. It had no name, just the letters HOA printed neatly on the front. John frowned. He had received letters from the Homeowners Association before, mostly harmless reminders about lawn care or parking rules. But this one felt different. There was something about the way it was left, almost like someone wanted him to notice it, like a warning. He picked it up carefully, his fingers brushing the envelope as if it might bite. Inside was a single sheet of paper. The words were typed, formal, and oddly threatening. Dear resident. This is a reminder that repeated violations of HOA rules will not be tolerated. Immediate action will be taken if compliance is not observed. Your cooperation is expected. John read it twice. Violations? What violations? He had mowed the lawn yesterday, the trash cans were tucked away neatly, and the mailbox was clean. Nothing seemed wrong. He looked around, half expecting to see a neighbor spying on him. But the street was empty. The only sound was the soft rustle of leaves in the wind. Strange, John muttered to himself. He tucked the letter into his pocket and went inside. He tried to shake it off, thinking maybe it was just a standard warning blown out of proportion. But something deep inside told him this was different. Later that day, his wife, Sarah, noticed the letter too. Sarah was always calm, the opposite of John, who tended to worry. She read the letter, her brow furrowing. This isn't normal, she said quietly. Look at the tone. It's aggressive. John nodded. Exactly. It doesn't feel like a normal HOA reminder. It's like they're trying to scare us. Sarah leaned back in her chair, thinking. She had dealt with many difficult situations before, but the way this letter was written gave her pause. It wasn't just formal, it was deliberate. Someone had written it carefully, choosing words that would unsettle. Over the next few days, things only got stranger. John began noticing small things that didn't make sense. The gate to their community, usually open in the morning, was sometimes closed without explanation. There were cars parked near their house that didn't belong to anyone in the neighborhood. Sometimes, he thought he saw a person walking slowly down the street, watching their house, but when he looked again, no one was there. One evening, as John returned from work, he saw another envelope on the porch. This one was heavier, and the paper inside had a different tone. It was almost personal. It has come to our attention that you have not been fully compliant with community standards. Continued failure to follow HOA guidelines will result in serious consequences. This is your final warning. John's hands trembled slightly as he read the words. The serious consequences part made his stomach twist. He showed the letter to Sarah immediately. Sarah looked at him, her calm demeanor masking her worry. John, they're trying to intimidate us, she said. This is more than just a warning. Someone wants us to feel scared. John's mind raced. He thought about what this could mean. Could the HOA really do anything? He had heard stories from friends, people being fined or told to remove things from their yards. But serious consequences? That sounded like something more dangerous. They decided to document everything. John started taking pictures of the letters, of any strange cars or people he noticed near their home. Sarah made notes of the dates and times. They knew that if things escalated, they would need evidence. Then one night, something happened that made their fear feel very real. Around 10 p.m., they heard a loud knock at the door. John peeked through the peephole and saw a man in a uniform standing there. Hello, sir, the man said, his voice firm but polite. We need to speak with you about HOA compliance issues. John froze. There was something off about the man. The uniform didn't look right. The badge on his chest was shiny, but it seemed fake. And he was carrying a clipboard with papers that looked official, but somehow wrong. John stepped back, glancing at Sarah. She walked calmly to the door, her eyes assessing the man carefully. Good evening, she said. Can I see some identification, please? The man hesitated, fumbling with his badge. This is, a routine check. HOA policy requires verification of compliance. Sarah's eyes narrowed. I need to see your official ID from the police or local authorities. HOA doesn't send law enforcement. You need proper identification. The man's confident expression faltered. He shuffled his feet, looking uncomfortable. I'll come back later, he muttered and quickly walked away. John closed the door, heart racing. Did that just happen? He asked. Sarah nodded, taking a deep breath. Yes. And that's proof. Someone is trying to scare us by pretending to have authority. We need to be careful. This isn't just a normal HOA issue anymore. For the next few days, the tension in the neighborhood felt almost tangible. Every time they received mail or saw a stranger on the street, they jumped. John felt anxious even during simple activities, like taking out the trash or checking the mail. They began to talk to neighbors, quietly at first, asking if anyone else had received strange letters or seen unusual people. Most shook their heads, saying everything seemed normal. But a few neighbors mentioned odd encounters, people knocking on doors late at night, asking questions that didn't make sense. John and Sarah realized they were not alone. Whatever was happening, it was part of a bigger plan. But they didn't know the full extent yet. One evening, as they sat together on the porch, Sarah turned to John. We need a plan, she said firmly. We can't just wait for them to make the next move. We have to be ready. John nodded, still feeling a mix of fear and determination. You're right. But what can we do? They're pretending to have authority. We don't even know who exactly is behind this. Sarah smiled faintly, but there was steel in her eyes. We'll figure it out. And when we do, they're going to regret trying to scare us. As the sun set, casting long shadows over their quiet street, John and Sarah realized something important. This was only the beginning. Whatever the HOA was planning, it was not going to be easy. But they had each other, and they were ready to fight back. And somewhere in the darkness, the HOA was already plotting their next move. The next morning, the air felt heavier than usual. John could not shake the feeling that someone was watching. The sun shone brightly, but every shadow seemed a little too dark, every rustling leaf a little too loud. He tried to brush it off, but even walking to the mailbox felt like stepping into a trap. As he opened the mailbox, he froze. Inside was another envelope, identical to the first. His hands shook slightly as he pulled it out. This time, the letter was thicker, as if it carried more weight both literally and figuratively. Resident, it began, your recent behavior has caused concern. Immediate compliance is expected. Failure to cooperate will result in enforcement actions. John frowned. Enforcement actions? What did that even mean? He could not ignore it. Something had clearly changed. Whoever was behind these letters was no longer just sending warnings, they were making threats. He decided to show it to Sarah. She read it carefully, her expression unreadable at first. Then she leaned back in her chair and whispered, "They're getting bolder." Before John could respond, there was a knock at the door. Not a soft, polite knock. A heavy, deliberate knocking that made their hearts race. John peeked through the peephole and froze. Standing there was a man wearing a uniform that looked almost like law enforcement, but not quite. His hat was slightly crooked, his badge reflective but suspiciously thin. He held a clipboard tightly and stared at the door as if daring them to answer. John swallowed hard. "He's back," he whispered. Sarah stepped forward calmly. "Hello," she said firmly. "Can I help you?" The man cleared his throat. "I'm here regarding HOA compliance issues. I need to conduct an inspection." Sarah's eyes narrowed. "I need to see official identification. Your badge. Your ID. Your credentials." The man hesitated, shifting nervously. His confidence, which had seemed so firm a moment ago, was beginning to crumble. I'll come back later, he stammered and turned to leave. John exhaled, relief and fear mixing in his chest. But then a chilling thought struck him: someone was pretending to have authority. Someone could be dangerous if pushed too far. For the next few days, things became even stranger. John began noticing cars parked near their house, cars that did not belong to anyone in the neighborhood. Late at night, headlights would sweep past their windows, stopping briefly before moving on. Shadows appeared where no one should be, and sometimes, faint footsteps echoed when the house was empty. Sarah suggested they start documenting everything. John set up cameras at the front and back of the house, capturing any unusual movement. Sarah kept a log of the times, dates, and descriptions of the people or cars they noticed. Each entry added a growing sense of unease. One evening, while reviewing the footage, John noticed a figure standing near their driveway. The person was wearing a hoodie, face hidden in shadow, and seemed to be watching their home for minutes at a time. John's hands tightened around the mouse as he zoomed in on the figure. It was clear, they were being targeted. Sarah watched silently over his shoulder. "They're testing us," she said quietly. "They want to see how we react." John nodded. "But why us? What could we have done?" Sarah shook her head. "It's not personal. It's about control. Whoever is behind this wants to scare anyone who resists them." The tension reached a peak one afternoon when a knock on the door startled them. Sarah opened it carefully and found a man standing there, holding a clipboard. His uniform looked more official this time, but something in his eyes made John uneasy. He seemed nervous, like he wasn't sure how far to push. "Good afternoon," he said. "We're here to inspect your property for compliance." Sarah's lips pressed together. "Your credentials, please." The man fumbled with his badge again, his hands shaking slightly. It's in my vehicle." I'll get it." John stepped closer, his voice low but firm. "We're not letting anyone in without proper ID. We've seen enough already. Leave, now." The man hesitated, looking between them. Then, almost as if realizing he had no power, he turned and left quickly, leaving the door swinging. Sarah closed it and leaned against it, exhaling slowly. "This is getting dangerous," she said. John rubbed his temples. "We can't ignore it. They're testing us. But if we act rashly, we could make it worse." They decided to speak to a few neighbors discreetly. Surprisingly, some had noticed strange visitors, 2 people asking odd questions, taking notes, or hanging around late at night. A pattern was forming. They weren't imagining things. The HOA, or someone working with it, was escalating. That night, as they sat together, Sarah turned to John with a serious expression. "We can't wait for them to make the next move. We need to be ready. We need a plan." John nodded, determination mixing with fear. "But how? They're pretending to have authority. And we don't even know how far they'll go." Sarah's eyes glinted in the dim light. "We'll figure it out. But first, we need to understand exactly who we're dealing with. And if they think they can intimidate us, they're about to learn a very hard lesson." As the night settled over the neighborhood, a chilling thought crept into their minds. Whoever was behind the fake enforcement had made their first real mistake. They underestimated John and Sarah. And somewhere, in the shadows, the HOA or whoever was orchestrating these events was already planning their next move, unaware that the people they were trying to scare were quietly preparing to fight back. The morning after the strange visit, John woke up feeling a tight knot in his chest. Sleep had barely touched him. The memory of the man in the fake uniform haunted him, the way he had hesitated, the slight panic in his eyes. Whoever sent him had made a bold move, and now John knew they were not just annoying neighbors, they were dangerous. Sarah, on the other hand, appeared calm as ever. She had already started going through their files, letters, and notes from the past week. She spread everything across the kitchen table, photos of the suspicious cars, copies of the HOA letters, and the log John had been keeping. "Look at this pattern," Sarah said, pointing to the timeline she had created. Every visit, every letter, happens when we're either alone or distracted. They're careful, but not careful enough. John leaned over the table, squinting at the notes. So, they're testing us. Trying to find weak points. But why us? We've done nothing wrong. Sarah shook her head. It's not about right or wrong. It's about control. Whoever this is wants to make people obey without question. And they clearly underestimated us. John glanced at the photos. In one, a car was parked across the street with a person standing near their mailbox, half hidden behind a tree. The person didn't notice the camera, and the image was grainy, but it was enough to send chills down his spine. They're watching everything, John whispered. Sarah nodded. Exactly. And the first step is to know exactly who we're dealing with. Over the next few days, they started a quiet investigation. Sarah suggested calling the local authorities, not about the HOA itself, but to verify whether the inspector was real. The officers on the line confirmed what Sarah already suspected: there had been no official visit scheduled, and no officer had been sent to their address. They're faking it, John said, disbelief and anger mixing in his voice. Someone actually sent a fake officer to scare us. Sarah's eyes flickered with a hint of excitement, though it was controlled. Yes, she said. And that gives us an advantage. A real officer would have authority we couldn't challenge, but a fake one? That's just fear, and fear can be exposed. The couple decided to go one step further. They researched the HOA board members online, cross-referencing addresses, emails, and phone numbers. They even checked local business licenses and social media profiles, looking for anyone with a suspicious background or connections that didn't make sense. Days of careful observation paid off. They noticed that some of the cars they had captured on camera were repeatedly parked near certain board members' homes. One particular member's social media activity was odd posts about enforcing community rules appeared hours before each suspicious visit. John rubbed his forehead. This is bigger than I thought. Someone on the HOA is orchestrating this, but why risk faking authority? They could get in serious trouble. Sarah leaned back, her mind working faster than John could follow. Because fear works faster than rules. And now, they've escalated too quickly, they're sloppy. That gives us the opening we need. It was during this time that Sarah's skills quietly came into play. John didn't fully understand them yet, but he noticed the way she could notice patterns he would have missed, the subtle timing of the letters, the repeated mannerisms of the fake officer, and the small mistakes they made that revealed their plan. It was almost like she could read their moves before they even happened. John began to realize something important: Sarah was not an ordinary neighbor. There was something in her calm confidence that suggested experience far beyond regular life. But he didn't press her. He trusted her instincts. One night, while reviewing the latest footage, they caught something even more alarming. A figure lingered near their house, just beyond the streetlight, watching them carefully. The person paused, looked directly at the camera, and then slowly walked away. That's too close, John said, his voice low. They're not hiding anymore, they want us to know they're watching. Sarah nodded. Yes. And now we know we're not just dealing with letters and fake visits. We're dealing with someone bold enough to test boundaries. But boldness comes with mistakes, and mistakes can be used against them. For the first time, John felt a spark of hope. They weren't helpless. They had evidence, patterns, and most importantly, Sarah's experience, which he was starting to see as extraordinary. As they sat together in the quiet living room, Sarah whispered something that sent a chill down John's spine, but also gave him reassurance. We're going to turn this around, she said. They think they have power, but they're about to find out, power isn't always what it seems. That night, John lay awake, staring at the ceiling. He couldn't stop thinking about the fake officer, the letters, and the shadowy figure outside. But for the first time, he also thought about Sarah, not just as his wife, but as someone who could handle things he hadn't even imagined. And somewhere in the darkness, the people orchestrating these attacks didn't realize they were being watched as closely as they were watching. Every move they made, every intimidation attempt, was slowly being recorded, analyzed, and prepared for a response they would never see coming.
the escalation was only beginning. But John and Sarah were no longer just victims.
They were becoming something stronger, something the HOA, or whoever was behind this, was about to regret. The morning sun barely peeked over the horizon when John noticed something unusual outside their window.
A dark SUV was parked across the street, engine idling quietly.
It wasn't the first suspicious vehicle, but there was something different about this one. Its windows were tinted so heavily that no one could see inside. John nudged Sarah, who was sipping her coffee, and pointed out the SUV. "They're back," he whispered, his voice tense.
Sarah didn't flinch.
She set her cup down and walked to the window, observing quietly.
"It's the same pattern," she said softly. "They're testing boundaries, waiting for a reaction."
John felt a chill. Every time they tried to ignore it, the situation escalated.
He had a sinking feeling that today would be different.
No sooner had he finished speaking than a knock echoed through their front door.
This one was heavier than before, more deliberate. John froze.
Sarah, calm and composed, motioned for him to step back. She opened the door slowly. Standing there was a man in a uniform. This time, it looked more convincing. His badge gleamed under the morning sun, and he carried a clipboard as if ready to conduct an inspection. "Good morning," the man said, his tone smooth but carrying an edge.
"We need to speak about HOA compliance issues.
You're required to cooperate."
Sarah's eyes narrowed. "ID a badge. Credentials. Now."
The man's confident smile faltered. He hesitated, shuffling his papers.
I'll get them, from my vehicle." John stepped forward, tension in his shoulders. "We've seen enough. No identification means you leave. Now."
The man's eyes darted nervously. He looked like someone who had rehearsed authority, but the slightest pressure exposed his uncertainty. Sarah leaned in, voice calm but firm.
"Listen carefully. We know who you are, we've documented every visit, and we've verified there's no legitimate authority here. This ends now."
The man's hand twitched toward his clipboard, like he might argue or threaten, but Sarah's gaze pinned him in place. It wasn't just her words, it was her presence. John realized, for the first time fully, that Sarah exuded authority in a way he had never seen.
The man stammered. I wasn't. I mean." "Enough," Sarah interrupted.
"Leave, before this becomes a legal matter."
"You are trespassing, and we have evidence of your intimidation." He glanced at the SUV across the street.
Two more men were stepping out, appearing just as unprepared, faces pale with uncertainty.
The fake enforcement facade was crumbling. John felt adrenaline surge. He had never seen Sarah like this before.
Her calm, precise control of the situation was mesmerizing. The tension that had gripped him for days now felt like a turning point. The man holding the clipboard muttered something unintelligible and retreated toward the SUV. Within minutes, the vehicle roared to life and sped away, leaving John and Sarah standing on their porch, the morning suddenly quiet again.
John exhaled shakily. That was intense.
They really thought they could push us around.
Sarah placed a hand on his shoulder. They underestimated us. That's all.
Her voice was calm, but John sensed a fierceness beneath it. She had seen through the deception instantly and knew exactly how to handle it. The couple retreated inside, hearts still racing. John sat at the kitchen table, trying to process what had just happened.
"Sarah, how did you know exactly what to do? I've never seen anyone handle it like that." Sarah smiled faintly, almost secretively.
"Experience," she said, her eyes avoiding his.
"Sometimes, you know what authority looks like even before it's shown."
John nodded slowly, sensing there was more to her words than she wanted to reveal.
He didn't press.
What mattered now was that the confrontation was over, at least for today. Later that evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, John and Sarah reviewed the events of the day. The fake enforcement had been forced to retreat, humiliated by their preparation and unwavering stance.
It was a small victory, but an important one. Sarah's mind, however, was already moving ahead.
She had noticed subtle signs during the confrontation, the hesitation in the leader's voice, the lack of coordination between the men, and the sloppy execution of their plan.
Each detail was a thread she intended to pull.
John watched her, impressed and slightly awed.
"They won't come back, will they?" he asked.
"They might," she said thoughtfully.
"But if they do, we'll be ready.
And next time, they won't leave quietly."
That night, John lay awake thinking about the morning. He realized something important: this was no ordinary HOA issue.
Whoever was behind these attacks had made a critical mistake. They had underestimated Sarah.
And underestimating Sarah was something no one would survive.
Outside, the neighborhood seemed peaceful, almost serene.
But John and Sarah both knew better. The confrontation had only marked the beginning of a larger battle.
The next moves would be calculated, deliberate, but now, they had the advantage: knowledge, preparation, and a quiet power that had yet to be fully revealed. As shadows stretched across the quiet street, John finally understood the truth. The HOA, or whoever was orchestrating this, was about to meet resistance like they had never imagined. And Sarah was the reason they wouldn't succeed. The tension in the house had been building for days, but this morning felt different. The quiet street seemed almost too calm, as if the world was holding its breath. John sensed it immediately, the kind of unease that comes just before something monumental happens.
Then came the knock. Not a timid or hesitant knock this time.
It was sharp, assertive, demanding attention.
John exchanged a glance with Sarah.
"They're back," he whispered.
Sarah's expression remained calm.
"I expected this," she said softly. There was a confidence in her voice that John had never heard before, a certainty that went beyond mere experience. John opened the door cautiously, and there stood the same man from before, the leader of the fake enforcement team. But this time, he wasn't alone. Two others flanked him, and their faces showed a mixture of determination and apprehension. They had returned, ready to intimidate. The leader held a clipboard and spoke first, his tone forced and unnatural.
"Good morning. We are here to enforce compliance. You are required to follow HOA regulations immediately. Any resistance will have consequences."
Sarah stepped forward, calm and measured. "You've made a mistake coming here again," she said. Her voice was quiet, but every word carried a weight that made the men pause.
The leader smirked, trying to regain authority. "We have authority. You must." Sarah interrupted, reaching into her jacket.
She pulled out a badge and held it up so the morning sun caught its gleam.
"I'm a U.S. Marshal. You are trespassing and impersonating law enforcement. This ends now." John's breath caught in his throat.
The badge was real, official, and it radiated authority.
The men's confident expressions faltered instantly. The leader stammered, "What? You can't."
"I just did," Sarah said calmly. "Every move you've made, every threat, every attempt to intimidate us, it's illegal.
You are going to leave, and you are never coming back.
Otherwise, the consequences will be real, and they won't be negotiable." The men exchanged glances.
Their earlier bravado had evaporated. They looked like schoolchildren caught in a lie. The SUV parked across the street suddenly seemed less intimidating.
Their carefully rehearsed plan, built on fear and deception, had crumbled. John watched, awestruck, as Sarah's calm authority dominated the situation.
She didn't yell. She didn't panic.
Every word, every movement, projected control. The leader took a small step back, fumbling with the clipboard.
Look," he said finally, voice shaky, we didn't know." "You knew enough to try and scare us," Sarah said evenly.
"And now you know the consequences of underestimating people who are prepared.
Leave. Now."
The men hesitated, then slowly retreated. The SUV engine roared to life, and within moments, they sped away, leaving nothing but silence behind.
John exhaled deeply, relief flooding through him.
He turned to Sarah, his eyes wide.
I
had no idea," he said.
"A U.S. Marshal? Why didn't you tell me?"
Sarah smiled faintly. But there was a glint in her eyes that told him this was not a moment for explanations.
"It wasn't the time," she said. "Knowing isn't the same as being ready. Now, we're ready."
John nodded slowly, understanding dawning. All the clues, the calm authority, the ability to read patterns, the precise handling of the confrontation, they weren't luck.
Sarah had been prepared for this, even when he wasn't.
For the first time in days, the house felt safe. The letters, the fake enforcement, the SUV parked across the street, they were all powerless now.
The danger had passed, at least for today. But Sarah knew this wasn't the end. Whoever was behind the HOA's intimidation would be shaken, humiliated, and angry.
They might try again, but now, she had the ultimate advantage. She had the law, authority, and preparation on her side. John looked at her, a mixture of awe and gratitude in his eyes. "You saved us," he said quietly. "No," she replied softly, but firmly.
"We saved ourselves. I just gave them a very clear warning. Fear only works if you let it. And we never let it."
That night, as they sat on their porch watching the street grow dark, John felt a new kind of calm. The storm had passed, but the lessons remained. Preparation, courage, and authority could turn the tables on even the boldest intimidation. And somewhere out there, the people who had tried to scare them were learning that the house they thought was easy to intimidate belonged to someone they could never control.
The reveal of Sarah's badge wasn't just a moment of triumph, it was a turning point.
From that moment on, the balance of power had shifted entirely. The neighborhood was unusually quiet that afternoon, as if it too sensed the approaching confrontation. John and Sarah had spent the morning preparing, cameras positioned, notes reviewed, and a plan silently agreed upon.
This wasn't just about responding anymore, it was about ending the HOA's intimidation once and for all.
Across the street, a familiar black SUV rolled slowly into view. John tensed, his hands tightening around the kitchen counter. "They're back," he said, his voice low.
Sarah's eyes didn't waver. "Yes. And this time, we won't just react. We'll control it." Moments later, the front door shook with a heavy knock. John and Sarah exchanged a glance.
The trio of fake enforcers had returned, thinking boldness would succeed where subtlety had failed. The door swung open, and the leader stepped in first, clipboard in hand, trying to project authority.
"Good afternoon. We are here to enforce compliance. Any failure to cooperate will."
"Stop right there," Sarah said, her voice calm but carrying an unmistakable edge of authority. She stepped forward, badge in hand, the gleam of it catching the sunlight.
"You've trespassed, impersonated law enforcement, and attempted to intimidate residents. All of your actions have been recorded and documented. You are done." The men froze. Their previous confidence wavered instantly.
The leader opened his mouth, but no words came out. John watched, amazed, as Sarah's calm control dominated the room.
She didn't shout.
She didn't threaten unnecessarily.
Her presence alone was enough to undo their intimidation.
"Now," she continued, moving closer, "you will leave. Every vehicle, every person, and every attempt at harassment will be reported.
There will be legal consequences. And trust me, you don't want to test me."
The men glanced at one another, fear and panic visible. The SUV parked outside seemed suddenly irrelevant, powerless in the shadow of Sarah's authority.
One of them finally stammered, "We didn't mean." "Silence," Sarah interrupted sharply. "You were warned. You've had multiple opportunities to stop. Now, you will leave before this situation escalates further."
The men exchanged frantic whispers, realizing that the facade of power they had built over days was crumbling. The leader dropped the clipboard onto the porch, muttering something under his breath, and signaled the others to retreat. John felt a surge of relief as the SUV roared to life and sped away. Silence returned to the neighborhood, but this time, it was final. The confrontation had ended, decisively, with no doubt as to who held control.
Inside, John and Sarah sat together, hearts still pounding but calm now.
John turned to Sarah, his voice filled with awe.
"I've never seen anyone handle a situation like that.
You didn't just stop them, you dismantled them. Sarah smiled faintly, but there was steel in her eyes.
It's not about stopping them.
It's about showing them that fear only works if you allow it. They tried to scare us, but preparation, knowledge, and authority can turn the tables completely.
John nodded, finally understanding. This wasn't just about the HOA letters or fake enforcers.
This was a battle of power, and Sarah had shown him exactly how to wield it. Later that evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, John and Sarah reviewed the footage and notes one last time.
Every move of the fake enforcers had been recorded.
Every mistake, hesitation, and attempt at intimidation documented. They had all the evidence they needed, not just to protect themselves, but to prevent anyone else from being harassed in the future.
Sarah's mind, however, was already ahead. She knew the HOA board, or whoever was behind this, would be reeling from their defeat.
Some might retreat entirely, others might plan smaller, less noticeable actions. But she was ready. She had the law, authority, and preparation on her side, and now, John understood that they were stronger together than anyone could anticipate. John looked at her, admiration clear in his eyes.
They won't be coming back, right? Sarah's lips curved into a small, confident smile.
Not unless they're ready to face consequences far greater than fear. And trust me, they aren't. Outside, the neighborhood returned to its quiet normalcy, but John and Sarah knew that they had changed something fundamental. The HOA, the fake enforcers, the intimidation tactics, they had all been rendered powerless by preparation, courage, and authority. And for the first time in weeks, John felt truly safe. Not because danger had disappeared, but because he now understood that fear could be met with control, and control could turn even the most threatening situations into victory.
This showdown wasn't just a win. It was a statement. A message. And anyone who tried to challenge them in the future would understand one thing clearly: John and Sarah were not to be intimidated. The battle was over, but the lesson was eternal. The quiet of the neighborhood returned slowly, almost unnaturally so. For the first time in weeks, John and Sarah could sit on their porch without jumping at every passing shadow. The air felt lighter, the sun warmer, and even the usual hum of distant traffic seemed calmer. But the peace was not just a matter of circumstance. It was earned. Every letter, every fake visit, every shadowy car had been documented. Every intimidation attempt had been met with preparation, authority, and courage. And now, the HOA or whoever had orchestrated these attacks was left exposed, powerless, and humiliated. John leaned back in his chair, a deep sigh escaping him. "It's finally over," he said. Sarah shook her head gently, her gaze sweeping the quiet street. "It's not over." "Not really." John turned to her, confused. "What do you mean?" "They're gone. They won't come back." Sarah smiled faintly, but her eyes were sharp, calculating. "Some of them might retreat for now. But fear leaves a mark. And marks can turn into obsession. The important thing is that we've set the rules. Anyone who tries to challenge us knows exactly what happens." John nodded slowly, finally understanding. This wasn't just about intimidation. It was about power, control, and respect. And Sarah had shown him that true authority wasn't loud or aggressive, it was calm, precise, and undeniable. Over the next few days, they shared some of their experiences with neighbors discreetly. Many had noticed strange cars, unusual visits, or letters they had ignored at first. John and Sarah's documentation became a quiet warning: intimidation might exist, but there was a way to respond without fear. One evening, as they sat together reviewing the footage one last time, Sarah leaned back and exhaled. "Every threat we faced, every attempt to scare us, it taught us something. Not just about them, but about ourselves. Preparation, vigilance, and calm authority, that's how you turn fear into power." John smiled, but there was still a shadow of worry in his eyes. "Do you think they'll ever try again?" Sarah's lips curved into a faint, knowing smile. "Possibly. But if they do, we'll be ready. And next time, they won't just be running, they'll be running from consequences they can't ignore." As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, the couple sat together in silence. The street was quiet, peaceful,
and yet, the memory of what had happened lingered like a warning. Somewhere out there, the HOA or whoever had tried to intimidate them was no doubt reflecting on their failure. They had underestimated John and Sarah. They had assumed fear could control them. But the reality was clear: authority, preparation, and courage could overcome even the most brazen threats. John glanced at Sarah, admiration clear in his eyes. "I've never felt safer, and never more proud." Sarah placed a hand on his, a gentle reassurance. Safety isn't just about avoiding danger. It's about facing it and knowing you can handle it. And now, we've proven that. That night, as darkness settled over the quiet neighborhood, John and Sarah realized something important: they had won more than a battle. They had gained understanding, confidence, and the knowledge that fear could never dominate them again. And somewhere in the shadows, there remained the faintest hint of movement. Not immediate danger, just a reminder that the world was never completely predictable. But now, John and Sarah faced it with eyes wide open, ready for whatever came next. The HOA's intimidation had failed. Authority had prevailed. And the couple knew, deep down, that no one would dare underestimate them again. The story of fear, control, and courage had reached its climax, but the lesson endured: true power lies not in threats, but in preparation, resolve, and the quiet strength to stand firm.